Good evening, good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining another live streaming session with me, David Benton, and home in Italy. Absolute pleasure to be here in sunny Abruzzo in the center of Italy. So good to be here this evening. Usually, as you know, we do these on a Thursday evening, but unfortunately, I had different engagements last night, so obviously we're doing this tonight, which is Friday, and also. Before we start, I want to say that it's Friday night, it's St. Patrick's Day, and my wife was born in Dublin, so that entitles me by law to enjoy a glass of white wine, which I'm going to do during the show. I know it's unprofessional, but it's St. Patrick's Day, and so you can't knock me for that. So this was the only colour of the Irish flag that I considered doing. Because obviously I did think red wine, and then I realised that's the Italian flag. So I had a choice of orange, green, or this. So obviously I went to this. So anybody from Ireland that's watching, Tony's messing around with the noises as per usual. If anybody from Ireland is watching, then cheers to you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Can you hear the sound effects? Tony can tell's had a few drinks, so there may be a few other sound effects as we go along this evening on this very joyous occasion of St. Patrick's Day. So, as I say, congratulations not congratulations, best wishes to all the Irish people out there. I hope you're having a great day and have a great evening as well. So, there you go. We're going to be talking tonight about restoring properties in Italy. I'm going to be getting rid of a few myths out there, telling you a few bits of the serious parts, what you should do, what you've got to do, and all that kind of stuff. Showing you a few photographs, and then hopefully we'll have time. I'll show you the restoration project that we did in this property, and you can have a look at some photographs. There's lots of photographs to look at tonight. Hopefully it won't be too boring for you. Pete saying no Guinness. Now, you know something, Pete? I can't get on with Guinness. I don't know why. I should have really tried, but it's just something I can't handle. But there you go. So Ruth, yes, from Ireland. Yeah, so it's not congratulations. What's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, I completely forgot. More sound effects, the better. Okay, Sean, you heard that, Tony? Don't tell him that. Don't start him off. Anyway, so let's just talk quickly before we get into the restoration ones. Let's just tell you what's coming on next week. Next week, we've got our usual Meet the Home Buyers, which is always a popular one on here. And we've got a great couple that's coming in next week who've just signed. When was it? Yesterday. My memory is terrible. It's probably the white wine. Yes, they signed yesterday or the day before yesterday. I can't honestly remember. It's Friday today. So yes, Wednesday. They got their fantastic property here in Abruzzo. Really, they bought two properties actually. Great couple from the Netherlands. So they're going to share with us their story about how they found Abruzzo, how they found that property. And what they thought of the buying system and all that kind of thing. So that's going to be next week, next Thursday. We're back to Thursdays next week. So that's Meet the Home Buyers. Then we have Mr. Grim Reaper himself that is making his appearance, telling us all about these Italian taxes. So Gianluigi will be joining us. It's a good job that he's a nice person because the subject he's talking about is terrible. But we are going to be going through taxes that are due on income and that kind of thing. If you decide to move to Italy, he's going to be telling us about the 7% worldwide tax regime. So that's going to be a great one. It's also going to give little bits of guidance when it comes to owning a property, maybe a second property, or maybe you're renting it out, things like that. That's on the 30th. So don't miss that one. I was going to mention, well, I will mention it now. I've pressed this. The 4th and 5th of May, the Home in Italy on the Road, which I told you about, the guided trip that we do where we take people around properties in different areas. I'm just waiting for 2 people to confirm, and then I'm afraid it is full, which is absolutely fantastic. But I'm hoping to, well, not hoping, I'm definitely doing one in October. We are considering possibly doing another one towards the end of May, beginning of June, but when it gets too hot, it's not much fun. So we do try and keep these to the not the cooler times because it's still warm in May, but yeah. So this particular one is full, but I am going to be putting new dates in October. So I will let you know about that. We're looking possibly towards the end, around about the the 23rd or something like that. The week commencing the 23rd. So I will let you know as soon as we've booked that, and hopefully people that couldn't make it on this May trip will be able to do that. So as I say, we're going to be talking about restoring a property in Italy. Lots of photographs to show you. Please feel free to ask any questions that you like. Tony, I'm going to hide my bits now, and I'm going to turn my chat screen on. Tony is the one that chooses which comments come through. So if I don't answer any questions, don't blame me, blame him, because he's the one that does it all. Hello from cold and wet London. Sorry about that, Dave. It's absolutely glorious here at the moment. Okay, we can see, yep, Facebook has now joined us. YouTube has joined. We've got a great amount in tonight, considering it's Paddy's Day. I might just have a little drink for that. That's enough now. I'll stop being so unprofessional. Okay, so let's get talking about restorations and that kind of thing. Please feel free to that's the alcohol to ask any questions that you like. But what I'm not going to do, what I'm going to say, sorry, I've got to see this one. Happy St. Patrick's Day from Pacentro, Alex and Trudy, and happy St. Patrick's Day to you. That was the word I was looking for, to say happy St. Patrick's. Great couple that I'm taking around showing properties to, and hopefully they're going to be joining us on a future Meet the Home Buyers if we can get there, which I'm sure we will. Okay, so have a great one anyway, Alex and Trudy. I really hope you do. So let's get talking restorations. As I say, please feel free to ask any questions. What I'm not going to do is sit here discussing, well, it costs this much to do this and this much to do, because it is quite difficult to do that. There's a couple of things that I will give you some ideas of prices around, but this is more about what you need to be doing and the way the restoration system works. So please feel free to ask questions as we go along. I will be doing a video soon as well. I'm going to be taking some video footage from some restoration projects that we're currently handling. And in that video, I will give people ideas of prices and all that kind of thing. Okay, so keep sending your hellos from wherever you are in the world. It's always great to see people from all over joining us. Okay, so what I want to do to start with is just talk about a couple of things that I want to what's the word? These things that always come up on the internet and that I just like to get rid of, these false facts and things like that. So there's a couple of those that I want to go through, and then we'll get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of how things work. The first one, I know we put the title of €1 property versus 100,000. I mean, obviously I'm not going to talk too much about the €1 properties. It's not something I do, but that's only because I'm not in the areas where most of these are. But what I do want to say is I do believe that the €1 properties are actually a good thing. I've got to give, unfortunately, I can't name names on here, which is a little bit of a shame because I would like to, but I have to give the Numpty of the Week award, and we're going to start and have these awards. I'm going to have little cups and things like that. The Numpty of the Week award. I was looking at a forum on social media, and somebody wrote on there, I'm thinking about going to look at a €1 property. What do you think? And one of the first comments that came up was, be aware that these properties need a lot of work. Now, that person deserves a cup, really, don't they? You know, and if the person that wrote it believed it as well, you know, that actually sort of took that serious as well, they deserve one. But can you believe that people actually write things like this? Because I just find, I laugh to myself that when of course they need restore. They're €1. I haven't even got €1 to put down here. €1, ladies and gentlemen. Of course they need work. Now, surely all of us realize that. Why do we need these armchair experts sitting there giving us this type of advice? I just do not know. But I just thought it was just a fantastic comment. I wish I could put them up on the screen, but I daren't, just in case I get into trouble. So, of course, they need work. Now, when it comes to the regulation, when it comes to buying the properties, it goes through the same things, the same systems, it goes through the notary and all the rest of it. And there are, of course, clauses in there that the property needs to be restored. And you have a certain time limit to restore those properties as well. This is all normal stuff. At the end of the day, you're getting a property for €1. The thing to remember is, just because something costs €1 doesn't mean that it's going to cost €100 to restore. Obviously, these are all obvious things. You're sat there thinking, why am I tuning in, listening to him to tell me these obvious things? That's because people must like these obvious things because they're always up on these social media comment things. But of course they're going to need restoring. But I believe, because a lot of people say as well that they don't think they're good because they're in bad towns, they're in towns that have no services in town. That's not true either. The idea of the €1 system was to repopulate the historical centre. So some of the towns, I mean, there was a couple of places in Abruzzo that started doing it. One in particular did it for a short amount of time. Is very close to where I am, and it's a great town. But what happens is the historical centres, especially the historical centres that have lots of steps and things like that, and you can't, hasn't got car access and the rest of it. What you find is people tend to move out of them, but they don't necessarily move out of the area. They'll just move down into the I don't know, into the lower part of town where you can get a car and things like that. Wendy's saying, can you do restorations long distance from out the country? Would you recommend even purchasing a property like this if you would need to do the restorations this way? I'll answer those questions a little bit later. I mean, I personally would, but you need somebody you can trust at the end of the day. So when it comes to, so that's what usually happens with these places, with the historical centres. People will not necessarily move away. Obviously, some people move away. That goes for a lot of towns, or a lot of rural towns, not just in Italy, anywhere in the world. It's an obvious thing that people tend to move closer to work and things like that. But these historical centres, people will come out of them, move just down the road, move, I don't know, half a kilometre away, something like that, somewhere maybe with a garage and everything else. So what happens is then the council don't want the historical centres to go to rack and ruin, so they do try and sell these properties off. And the couple of towns in Abruzzo that did it, one for a very short amount of time and the other one for a little bit longer, were great towns and are great towns still. So I disagree with that as well. I do strongly believe that it should be considered, as long as you're prepared to restore and you're prepared to understand that when you restore, that obviously it's going to cost money, and you need to look at it. You can't just sort of think you can come along and just touch it up, do things a little bit, because it doesn't work like that. You need to have professionals in and all the rest of it. But if it's something that you're considering doing, why not have a look at these €1 possible? I don't really like people ditching things like that. And it's usually because these people are probably a little bit jealous because there were none around when they were looking. So for me, a €1 property is worth a look at. You know, if it's something, if you find the right town or the right area, have a look. But remember, just because it's €1 doesn't mean that anything else is going to be cheap, and it doesn't mean that you can get around any of the paperwork, because there are strict things. It's got to be done properly. You can't just get Joe Bloggs from down the road who once built a house when he was 10 and thinks he can still do it now he's retired. You know, it's got to be done properly, and so it should be done properly. So that's my first one. The second one, this one for me is an important one, and this is one that people need to really understand this, because I see this a lot as well, and it's talking about earthquakes. And everybody loves to talk about earthquakes. At the end of the day, Italy is seismic. We know that. You know, we know wherever there's mountains, there's all sorts of problems. That's just the way it is. They're very, very rare events. Let's be honest. You know, I live at the foot of the mountains. You know, and I've experienced 15 years. I've experienced the movement of a couple, and so they are very rare events. But obviously they do happen. They do happen in most of the world. Maybe not most of the world, but a lot of parts of the world. And the only place in Italy that is exempt from anything like that is Sardinia. Okay. Now, one thing that I see, again, when people start talking about restorations, people start saying, as soon as I mention it again on social media, I know I keep coming back to that, but that's where these conversations happen. And somebody will say, thinking about restoring a property, anybody got any advice? First of all, why are you asking these people? You just shouldn't. Secondly, that's one of the things where people will say, or even if you're buying a property, people will say, just make sure it's up to code before you buy it, because if not, you will have to do it. That's not true. That is a myth. That is not true whatsoever. I don't understand when people say, make sure before you do it that it's up to code and it's had everything. It would be impossible to bring the vast majority, I would say probably 80-90%, maybe even more, of properties up to code. And the reason for that is not because they've all been badly built, but things change all the time. So things change on a yearly basis sometimes. Sometimes they can change even twice a year. So to actually bring every property up to code, you would have to demolish everything as it stands now, rebuild it, and then if you sold that property again in another year's time, you'd have to demolish that, and so on and so on. It is not true. It is a myth. If you've got your heart set on a property in the historical centre, which we all love that kind of property, of any town, anywhere in Italy, and you want to buy that property, then you can buy that property as long as at the time it was built, it was done within the regulations. That's the key thing. If it was done before 1967, they did not need to have planning permission. That's something that you'll also see when you're buying properties, when you're buying older properties. It will be mentioned on the contract that the property was built prior to 1967. And that means then that they don't need to show any further documentation when it comes to planning and that sort of thing. After a certain date in 1967, any work that was done since then, you did have to go through planning permission and all that kind of thing. And that will be mentioned on your contracts when you buy. So that's an important thing to remember. So if you are looking at these properties in the centre, historical centre, as we all do, don't think that you've suddenly got to bring all these things back up to modern standards, because it would be impossible to do that, because modern standards now, they won't allow you to build, for instance, a stone property above one floor. Everything has to be a cement structure, and you can face it off in stone. So if you're thinking about buying, you're thinking about buying a piece of land to build something on, and you want a nice stone cottage and that sort of traditional stone farmhouse look, and you're starting from scratch, then you have to start with a cement structure. That's the law now. You can face it off in stone. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like a stone property, but it actually isn't one. So as I say, it would be impossible to bring that thing up to code. I bought this house that we're sat in now, was built in I think probably the start of the 60s, something like that. As I've done work on the property, anything such as, for instance, a new roof, if you need a new roof, that has to be up to current standards. If you're repairing the existing roof, then you don't have to bring that up to standards. So these are all really important things. Now, you may be thinking, yeah, but I don't want to buy a house that's not up to standards. Well, that's going to be very difficult unless you get something brand spanking new. That's not going to say that the house is going to fall down. It's just saying that it's not up to standard, and it doesn't need to be up to standard. And even when you sign your contract, for instance, it will talk about, there's a section in the contract when you buy a property that talks about the utilities, the electric and all things like that. And it will say to you that these were done at the time, they were done at the standards of the time. But we can't guarantee that's to today's standards, but they work. That's a phrase that goes into the contracts, just to say that, because obviously you can't say it's to today's standards because they could change all the time. So when you hear anybody talking like that, then tell them that I said that they're talking rubbish, because it is rubbish. Simple as that. But as I say, if you need to do any intervention work that means rebuilding something, so repairing a roof and I don't know, taking all the tiles off, maybe repairing part of the wood that's under there, replacing, putting some insulation in, replacing some of the tiles, all that kind of stuff, that still doesn't have to come up to code. But if you take that roof off and start again, then it's a completely different story. So remember that, because that's important. Okay, I'm going to cross these off as I go along. Otherwise, I'm going to completely forget where I'm up to. How would the process for buying a home in Italy while being in the EU? How would the process for buying a home? Gabriel, it doesn't really matter where you are, to be honest. I am going to be doing a webinar next month on buying properties remotely. So that's something that at the moment we're doing quite a lot of, when people find a property and they love and they buy it remotely. So we'll be doing a webinar on that one. Okay, another question that I get asked a lot, and there's lots of conflicting things on the internet, that kind of thing. Can I work on my own property? The short answer to that is yes. And there's two ways of doing it. It's your property, you can do what you want to a certain extent. Whether it's within the law afterwards, and when it comes to sell, if you want to sell afterwards, then you may have a problem, obviously. But I would say that's the same for pretty much all over the world. Because, if I'm doing work, I'm not a gas engineer. If I suddenly decide to change my gas boiler, I would probably blow half the house up. So obviously I can't do things like that. But if I want to paint a wall, obviously I can paint a wall. If I want to tile, I can do things like that. So the quick answer to that is, yes, you can, provided it's nothing to do with the structure and provided it's nothing to do with gas and electrics, that kind of thing. The rest of works you can do if you want to do some plastering, if you want to do tiling, if you want to, but let's say you wanted to open up a supporting wall, then that's completely different because that needs certain permissions and all that kind of thing. So you can work on your own property. You may want to change your bathroom. You may want to change your kitchen and things like that. You can do all of that. But when it comes to gas and that sort of thing and the structure, you can't do it. Question here, we've got, is it hard to find local renovation firms to take on your project? How to manage them from overseas? Paul, we're quite lucky because we've been doing this now for 17 years now, I think it is, maybe nearly 18 years. We do have teams of people in our local areas that we can rely on, and we also oversee things like that. It's all about finding the right people and trusting those people. If you find the right people and trust them, it's not easy. It's not easy managing a project, even though we do it a lot, because you could always do with that person being close by, so you can sort of bounce things off each other and make decisions there and then. But I think as long as people are talking and the photographs are flowing and things like that, I think it can be done. You know, we're doing a couple of projects at the minute, and hopefully one of them or both of them will come on and see what they thought about the process. One of them is ongoing, one we've already finished. So yeah, we'll maybe do another webinar where you can where they'll answer that question. So yeah, getting back to, can I work on my own? Yes, you can. Just remember, nothing to do with structure and things like that. So then people say to me, but do I need permission? Everybody asks this, do I need permission? Now, in your own country, you would ask permission if you were doing most jobs. A lot of us would. There'd have to be some sort of communication with your local council and that kind of thing. Now, everybody seems to want to try and avoid that when they're in Italy. I don't know if it's because people get the idea that in Italy everything's whatever, domani, and everybody just sits under olive trees and drink wine all day. And that, don't get me wrong, during August, that's one of my favorite pastimes. But it doesn't work like that. The process of buying a property here, in my opinion, is very simple, very straightforward. That's what we do talk about every week. It's very what's the word, transparent, and it's, as long as you're dealing with the right people, then it shouldn't give you any stress. Restorations are a different beast, but use the right people and it shouldn't give you any stress. You're always, when you've got workmen in your house, you're always going to have some sort of stress. There's going to be something that's just completely doing your head in after a few days. That's just life. But in general, it shouldn't be too bad. But the minute you start cutting corners, or the minute you ask Facebook, am I allowed to do this? And then something goes wrong, and then the police pop round, then they are the people that come on to the social media outlets saying this is a ridiculous system, blah, 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 blah. So as I always say to everybody, use the right people, use the professional people, ask the right questions. And what happens is the government actually, for using the right people and doing the right thing, the government actually, believe it or not, gives you a little bit of a discount from the VAT on things. So I'm going to tell you a few different things that you would come across if you were restoring a property. And let me just get this. This is where everything goes wrong. Okay. So there's different types of permissions that can be asked. One of them is called a CILA. One of them is a SCIA. And the last one is permesso di costruire. So the top one, a CILA, that is a permission that would be put together by a geometer. Everybody knows how much I like geometers, and I think they're great to have when you're buying a property and right through to the restorations and all the rest of it. And most of these things, well, all of these things can be done by a geometer. And a CILA is, let's say, I'm going to say basic works, but it can cover a lot of different types of work that you want doing in your house. So let's say, for instance, you wanted to take all the plaster off to reveal some stone. Everybody knows I love to do a little bit of that. Let's say you wanted to change the windows. I don't know, you're doing some electrical work, you're doing some plumbing work, all that kind of thing. That can go on a document called a CILA. Let's say you're just changing the windows. Okay, then again, go and have this, what they call a chiller. And a geometer, my geometer that I use, I asked him today how much he would charge if it was, for instance, something basic. Let's say you wanted a, I don't know, a new kitchen and some new windows, something like that. So he said he would do that on a chiller, and he would charge roughly five to 600 euros, roughly. What does that do? What does that do for you? Now, some people straight away, I can hear you saying, oh yeah, but why don't 500 or 600 euros before I even start? That's ridiculous. Now, remember what I said earlier, that the government actually gives you a discount on your building costs, and also on some of the materials, especially if your builder buys them. So that 500 or 600 euros, what it does is, first of all, the geometer takes on the responsibility of the paperwork, hands everything into the council. Nobody's going to come knocking on your door, okay? If somebody does come knocking on your door, everything's being done properly by a geometer. And then after the work has been done, depending what work it is, if anything needs to be registered because you've slightly changed something from how it was before, then your geometer can also do that as well. But he will give you a certificate, or she will give you a certificate that reduces your VAT down from 22% down to 10%. So I can hear you all saying, oh. So let's say, for instance, a builder is going to charge you, I don't know, 5,000 for doing something. Yeah. Straight away there, you save 12%, which is, anyway, 600 euros, 600 euros will it be? 650, somewhere around about that. So straight away, the money that you've paid your geometer, just on that one bill for your builder, you've got that money back. Yeah, but the good thing is that the geometer has taken care of everything. He's made sure that the council are aware of what you're doing. And that is really important. Now, some people may say, but I can do the kitchen, I can do things like that. But you should really consider that 12% is a lot when it comes to anything. Well, every 1,000 is 120 euros. See that for a calculation? Pretty impressed myself. The easiest calculation in the world. So that should be a consideration. Plus, you don't have to worry about anything. So there's lots of people that say, but what if I want to do the... Soon as people start asking me these sorts of questions and then trying to find a way around something, you know that one, they're doing something they shouldn't be, and two, they're going to find problems later. Why fight against a system that I think is pretty fair? So you've got this document called a chiller. Now, a chiller can cover lots of things. So it could be, my geometer was saying he's recently done one that had 80K's worth of work just on a chiller, which is a basic document. But because they weren't altering the structure or anything like that, he could do everything on this chiller. Now, when it's 80K's worth of work, it may cost a couple of €1,000 with a geometer. Again, I can hear everybody saying, a couple of thousand, oh my God. But think again, let's say half of that is in cost to the builder, and then the builder can buy certain material. You might be able to get say for instance, 60K's worth of invoices that you're saving 12% on. So that is 12% of 60K, everybody. Come on, tell me in the comments. It's over 6,000 euros. 7,200, I think, to be precise. So these things, don't fight against them. The system has been put there to encourage people to do the right thing. And again, you've got a geometer working by your side, because that geometer will also take on the role of director of works. So what does that mean? When you've got plumber, builder, and everybody, and all these, he's the one that's saying, right, we need to do it in this order, we're doing this. So you're paying for something that you're getting the money back for. You're actually getting more money back for it, and you're being completely in regular, as they call here. So why fight against that? I don't understand that. Maybe it's because I'm in this industry and I understand all these things work, but that's why I try and get the message out to you guys as well. Cut corners, you've got problems. It's as simple. Thanks, Peter. 7,200. It's written dollars, though. It's euros we're talking now. So I was a bit more precise, I think. Anyway, so yeah, it is really important. This is why these messages need to get out, because you put these sorts of questions on certain outlets, and people will say, of course you can do that, of course you can do that, of course you can do that. That's not how it works. So going back to that slide quickly again. So you've got a chiller. A shear is something that's a bit more complex. something that where you're actually doing something maybe with the structure as well. Maybe you're opening a wall to make it. We're doing a project at the minute where we've opened an archway, an opening in between two rooms to make it sort of one bigger room and that kind of thing. That would need the next document up when it's something a bit more, to do with the structure. And there could also be other documents needed that run alongside that as well. Then the third one is the permesso di costruire. So this is if you're building something new, or maybe you are having a new roof. You're not just sort of removing tiles and all the rest of it. You're getting rid of the roof and putting a new one on and that kind of thing. So that's a permission to build document that comes with lots of other things. But the vast majority of us will probably just use these two, the Chila and the Shia, number 1 and number 2. So, use these things. But when it comes to the third one, you have to use these things. But the important thing is just not to look at the options and to listen to people and just say, no, I'm going to try and get away with that, Because believe me, the fines are eye-watering if anybody catches you. Do renovation costs vary much from town to town in Abruzzo? Good question, John. I suppose the more remote you are, the more difficult it is to get to where you are. Maybe if you're in the middle of the historical centres, there should be a reasonable, the prices should be fairly even. The problem is at the minute with everything that's going off in the world is everything is inflated, isn't it, all over the world. And that's the big problem at the minute. And also getting builders is a bit of a problem because of all the incentives that the Italian government did with the famous 110, which we'll save that for another streaming session. So yeah, it should be round about the same, but cities, they will obviously charge more. Always try and find somebody local. But the important thing is to make sure you use the right people, use these geometers. Now, if you're doing something, if somebody says, yeah, but is there something where I don't need to have permission? Obviously, if you're doing something like, leave that question on Tony, because I will answer that in a second. If you're doing something like painting, or maybe just changing a few tiles, or maybe putting a new bathroom in, maybe you want to take the toilet out and put a new one in, and maybe a new shower. Things like that are basically called maintenance. So you can do things like that on your own. You don't need any permission, but make sure you know where you're putting these things. So when you're ripping things out, if you leave them piled up in your garden and the Carabinieri pass, because there's a branch of the Carabinieri that look after building control, there's also the Forestale now, which are Carabinieri as well. They may look at that part. You can't just leave a pile of rubble in your garden. You're not allowed to do it. It doesn't matter if it's your garden. If it's inside in bags in a garage, you may be all right. But if you suddenly pile up, loads of tiles and leave them on your land, then you could have problems. And again, you need to be seeing what you're doing. Where you're going to create rubble, you're going to create a mess. Where are you going to put that? Now, as long as you take it to the right places, because there are places where you can go, and you get receipts and things like that for it, then you can prove it. Because what you don't want is the Forestale to go past, see a huge amount of rubble outside your house, and you've thought, I'll just get rid of it this way and do this and do. I don't want to use this, don't want to use that. Come back a week later, and that pile of rubble's gone, and the Carabinieri knock on your door and say, this is a photograph I took last week. Can I have your receipt, please, to tell me where that stuff's gone? And then what? Then you're talking huge fines, especially if you live near a national park, because they may turn around and say, well, we found that somebody's been dumping in the national park. We believe that could be you. You've got to prove otherwise. So little things like that. Again, I can imagine some people thinking, oh my God, why should... But for me, this is common sense stuff. This is stuff that applies to lots of other countries as well. I'm sure it would do. I'm sure it would. So ask a geometer. Say, look, I'm thinking about doing this. Am I better off getting one of these documents where, yes, I need to pay you, but I'm going to get some money back, and then I'm going to be covered if anybody comes knocking at the door? They're the questions that you should ask. So Vicky is asking a great question. Do construction violations and fines transfer to new owners? No, they don't. And this is why you need everything to be translated so you know what you're signing for, because at the end of the day, any construction that's been done on that property, then when you come to buy that property, it's written that they had works done under this protocol number and so on, so. And that was done, and that goes into the signing. And if they get a fine for any reason, then no, the fine, anything up to the day of signing is the responsibility of the old owner. Which is why I always say, don't take something on that's abusivo, for instance. Let's say you buy something that's got an enormous garage, but it's not on the documents, and somebody says, oh, just take it, it's all right. You won't pay taxes on it, or you won't do this, you won't do that. That becomes a huge, huge problem for you. Then the fines become your problem. And you can't turn around and say, but they told me to sign, it was on the document. You're actually signing to say that garage is not there. So things like that are really important. Again, it's horrible to say, but it is common sense stuff. If you think about it properly, it's common sense stuff. And this is why I like to do these every week, to tell people, don't cut the corners. It's just not worth it. You shouldn't do it. I don't know why people try to do it here in Italy, but I do think it is that thing of, the way that the Italian system comes across. But believe me, it's not like that. When it comes to buying properties and restoring things, the restoration side, there are so many rules that you would not believe, some of the building control. And as I say, that the fines are eye-watering. And you get Joe Bloggs down the street to come and do a job that's not registered and everything else, and pay cash on the side, and like people like to do, you can get into huge, huge problems with things like that. Speak to a geometer, speak to the right people, because it could benefit you. Mike saying, what would be considered structural or non-structural, such as a wall that is not holding up the roof or floor above? Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if it's a small dividing wall, then that's a different thing. Let's say it's something, but again, you need to check with the geometer just to make 100% certain. One, for your own safety, and two, for the documents afterwards. Because if it is a structural wall and you took that down and you want to sell, and they say, well, that's a structural wall, who told you to put these beams in and things like that, you've got no documentation, you're going to be fined big style. So do it right in the beginning. There's enough incentives to do it right. So do it right, and you should have a lot less stress. Dave is saying, what ways, if any, can you find qualified contractors? Qualified, you should be able to see on their details. And again, when you employ a geometer, you're employing these people, and he will then, or she will, call all of these contractors and say, right, you're agreeing to do this work. You need to bring me all of your registration details, and you need to bring me up. There's certain things that geometers ask from the builders, the plumbers, the electrician, anybody that's working in your property. They want to ask these people to bring all the documents in. So that's another great thing, because at the end of the day, if anything goes wrong in that property, you go to the geometer. You don't go to Joe Bloggs and Joe Blogg, because they will go to the geometer. Everybody goes to that one person in the middle. But the geometer is the one that's saying to you, these people are legally registered. I'm putting them on the documents, and I'm telling the council. So if you were having, let's say you did want to do some work on your own without the help of anybody else, and you were doing some work, you're allowed to do it, but the builder said, but the geometer said, let's do a CILA document because it's only this, that, and the other. Let's say you start doing work and then you suddenly decide, you know what, actually, I want to bring a builder in to help me do this. Then you need to contact that geometer back, because they add them to the documents to then say there's somebody there. If not, what happens? The police come into your house. They just happen to be passing by. I've seen you doing some work, and it does happen. Believe me, it does happen. Seeing that you're doing some work, can we just have a look at? I've been to they've already been to the council, so they know that there's nobody should be working there. They've seen the builder's van outside. So what do they presume then? They presume that you're employing them on the side. Now, you may have thought, well, no, that wasn't my intention. But this is why you need a geometer, and they will explain all of this. And you can say, right, from next week, Joe Bloggs, the builder's coming in because I need a hand with that. They add them to the documents. Yes, it may cost you another €100, whatever it may be, but don't forget that builder's invoice, then, instead of him charging VAT at 22%, they charge you 10%. So this is why it's just so important to use the right people. So that's examples of the kind of permissions that you can ask. So Peter's saying, based on current conditions, to do some simple upgrades like a new kitchen cabinets and plumbing fixtures, how long would it take from the start of planning to completion? At the end of the day, things like that are not huge. I mean, new kitchens, and it takes longer to order the things these days, I think, than to actually do the work. And a lot of the companies that you buy from here will come and fit them and install them. If it's plumbing a new kitchen, let's say it was in stock and it was ready to go. It all depends on the availability of the plumbers. As soon as they start, they're great. I find the builders here superb. They get on with the job. I wouldn't like to say a time, really. What could I say? If everything's in and the plumbers are in there, a couple of weeks. I can't imagine it being long for things like that at all. Once the builders get stuck in and get on with things, it is really good. So a couple of things I wanted to mention. I mentioned rubble. So as I say, if you're trying to do things on the side and you're creating rubble, you're smashing tiles to pieces. Be careful what you do with that, because that is a telltale sign to the Carabinieri to quickly have a look at what's going on. And they drive past your house, they look at the rubble, straight away they go to the council. Can you tell me what work's being done at that house? So that's a huge thing to remember. When you're in the historical centres, don't presume that you can paint the house whatever colour you want, that you can change the windows to whatever colour you want. Always check with your local council. I'm thinking about painting my property in the Italian, in the Irish flag for St. Patrick's. Can I do it? And they will tell you. They actually have color charts where you can actually, there's usually loads and loads and loads of choices. But you need to check, because if you do one outside of that and it's in the historical centre, you can get into a lot of trouble. That's same with windows and things like that. Ask the question. Don't ask people on social media. Please, please don't, because they will say, well, I did it. Yeah, well, that council had different rules to there. And why would any of us listen to somebody that just says, well, I did it and they didn't say anything to me? That's like a school kid thing. So we've got to be serious. I hate being serious, but we do. Don't presume that you can have a swimming pool just because you've got a garden. I know estate agents that go around and say, you can have a swimming pool in here, look at this nice garden. Yes, size-wise, you could get a swimming pool in there, but are you allowed legally? Are you allowed legally? What kind of land is that on? A geometer will know that. So if you're thinking about buying a house and it's an absolute must-have that you're having a swimming pool, don't buy that house until you've spoken to a geometer. Can I have a swimming pool in there? Because you may be surprised. Now, there's always ways round, and there's things, we live in Italy, that's the great thing. But you need to find out, am I going to hit a stumbling block where this swimming pool is not going to be classed as a swimming pool, or I'm not allowed to have it whatsoever? You need to check that. Don't just think, I've got land, I've got space. Doesn't mean anything to do with it. It's same with extending your property. Don't presume you can extend. It doesn't work like that. Every property here has that sits on a piece of land. That piece of land will say that you can build a house of 200 square meters, for instance. Your house may already be 200 square meters, so you can't have any more on there. So don't presume just because you've got space that you can have an extension, because that is not how it works. And geometers are the ones to answer these questions. I know I keep saying it, but it's so important. Take your responsibilities serious, but most important, take your investment seriously, because you're spending an awful lot of money on these properties. You know, regardless of whether it's a 20 grand property or a 200 grand property, it's money. It's serious money. Do it right. Please, please, please do it right. What else was I going to say to you? Yeah, another one where people will say to me, I love open plan. I'd knock this wall down. I'll knock that wall down. And I say, you can't do that. And people say, yeah, but I'll just put supporting beams in. You can't do that. Doesn't matter how many times I say you can't do that. People don't believe it, but it's the truth. You can't just take walls down. Certain types of building, I'm going to show you a few photographs now, where you can take certain walls down. But stone builds and things like that, they're restricted to how much of an opening you can have. It doesn't matter how many beams. You could put Superman stuck up there and plaster him in and say, well, nothing's going to move that now. It doesn't matter how many iron beams you put in. It doesn't matter whether you can do it in England. It doesn't matter whether you can do it in America. Wherever you are, you're in Italy. You can't do it if it's a stone property. It's as simple as that. If you say, I want to make this window huge because that's got a nice view, I'm going to open all of that out. Don't presume that. So again, if you're buying a house and somebody's saying, yeah, that would be a good idea to do that. Yeah, if you bought this, you could maybe open that. No, check with the geometer. So it doesn't matter how many beams you put in. The law states no. They put it on their computer. They have the design program, and you can see them opening the window on this design program. And then after a while, that program will then close another window. So they're saying, okay, if you want that wider, then that window gets closed, because you're only allowed so many openings per wall or per so many meters and things like that. So don't presume that. Okay, that's a really important one. So that's all the bits now of the don't presumes, me moaning a little bit, and the different types of permissions. I'm going to get onto some photographs now. So yeah, please ask the right people. Get a good relationship with the geometer right from the start. I've always say it. A good relationship with the geometer will help you through not only the buying of the property and checking the documents and been there at the time of the notary, but then they'll talk about restorations and all the rest of it. It's just so important to have those good relationships. Okay, let's get onto a few pictures, and then hopefully I'm going to show you some of my restorations that we did here. So this is actually my house. This is when we bought our property. At the bottom of our house, we had lots of cantinas, as they call it, where they used to store wine. These openings weren't actually there. You can see the red marks where the geometer said, that's as wide. Now, I wanted to take all of that out. It's actually a little bit wider now. I managed to sneak a little bit more. But again, that my geometer said to me, you can't do that, because if you look to the left, I've got another opening there. And also to the right, which you can't see now, I've got openings. So he said, you can't just keep opening. And we managed to get that a bit wider through some calculations that they did. So this was Simon saying, the money we spent on Emidio, that's my geometer, by the way. Hi, Simon. Good to see you here. Was worth every cent and more. 500 euros is not a lot when you realize the amount of work the geometer does for you behind the scenes. Thanks for saying that, Simon, because it is true. And I know it wasn't a huge restoration project that you did, but you did quite a bit of stuff in there. And yeah, it's worth doing that, because you get these reductions and everything was done properly. So as I say, going back to my place, so this was a before. As you can see on the left hand side, you can see that there's stone here. We could see the stone, and we could see a bit of stone here. And now it looks like, if I can, how do I do this? What have I done wrong here, Tony? Here we go. And now it looks, obviously it's got a bit of furniture and stuff in there. But if you look at, here's that opening that you saw from before. We had to close, if you look at the window in the background, that is slightly smaller, well, quite a lot smaller actually than what it used to be, because the geometer didn't like the size of that window at the back. It was taking up too much compared to, because we had other windows and things like that in there as well. So that became a bit smaller. And then to the left-hand side here, that goes through into our kitchen. And obviously these used to be doors. You can see here the stonework that we decided to reveal. But we decided not to have stone everywhere. We just had it on certain walls, and then paint the rest white. That was our decision. Let's get another picture here. This is showing you a few different, this is our look, everybody, you're looking at our downstairs toilet area. But you never thought that, did you? Anyway, this is the kind of work that these people can do, which in my opinion, when it comes to stonework and things like that, get a local person in that knows what to do. So this was our downstairs toilet. It was slightly better condition than that before. This was when the builder already started smashing it to pieces. And then look, a little bit of revealing the stone and these tiles. These tiles cost next to nothing. I think there were €7 a square meter, something like that. It was ridiculous. And stone revealing, just so people know, stone revealing is roughly, it used to be round about €55 a square meter, but it's more like 75 now, unfortunately, with everything that's going on. So let me just come back to me, because it is something that lots of people like to do. So what happens is, if you've got a plastered wall, they've got to take the plaster off. That has a cost. Then they have to get rid of all the stuff in between the stone. Then they've got to sandblast all the stone to make it stand out. Then they've got to refill it, and that cost about €75 per square meter. So if you've got one wall, like one of our walls was 4 meters by 4, so that's 4 meters by 3 meters. So that's 12 times 75. So consider now around about €900, and you've got a good sized wall revealed. Somebody just asked, how long did your restorations take? They were actually really good. When I show you, I'll show you that the whole transformation we did on that, and they did it in great timing, because we had my daughter's Holy Communion, so we had a deadline for that. They got the house so far. They started in the January, that was in the May, and then they finished off in June, July time. No, I think it was July time. But when you see the work they did, it was brilliant. Can you spell out the term you keep using? It sounds like a geometer. Perfect. That's exactly what it is. What is that? Is it like a surveyor? Yes. Very similar to a surveyor. And they're for me, they're really important, because they go through, rather than an architect looking at calculations, the rest of it, a geometer will even help you out with buying the property and checking the documents and all that kind of thing. So we will have a session on geometers and the importance of. Okay, so let's get a few more photographs. This is my front porch. But you can see the amount of concrete. I mean, here it is concrete city, not just in my house, but anywhere. They have to do all this. It's not like in the UK. In the UK, you could put a terrace outside and it will never move. But obviously in Italy, anywhere where it's mountainous, I'm not just talking earthquakes, I'm talking about just general movement. The amount of stuff to put into these jobs is unbelievable. This is afterwards. Again, these kind of tiles that you buy here, much cheaper than some of the prices that people were telling me in the US in particular. The people were saying that the prices are a third. So these are not old tiles, they're just modern tiles that have been made to look old, which I think pretty good. It's same with the pillars that you can see on the right. This one, I wanted to show you this picture. This is a project that we did for a guy that lives down the road from me. When you get properties like this that are a cement structure, you can see here where the structure is. Now, a lot of the time with cement structures, the structure is obviously the parts that you're looking at now, which means that everything else in the middle, most of it can come out if needs be. Some of it may be structural, but some of it not. That's why you can have these huge windows to make most of the views, which is why sometimes I say to people, if views are huge, and they want to see it from in the house, then don't disregard those ugly looking properties, which mine was one of those, because some of those properties will make the most of all the views around. The views from this place are incredible, but they decide to have this cement build, so you can have bigger openings. You can't do that kind of thing. You couldn't have something this size, a window this size, in a stone property. And you can see here that there's a supporting beam, but it's a small supporting beam because this is the support here. But you can't do it in stone houses. You can't do it because they don't have this cement structure like this. Everything's been, it's the stone that's holding the thing up. You start taking that out and you're compromising the building. That's why I wanted to show you that one. Beautiful views from this is just at the end of my road. Here's another project. Look at this. This was a ruined property. Now just take a look at this for a transformation. I mean, that is just beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely stunning. Some of the work that these guys do. That's what again before, and they were afterwards. Are there seismic requirements that need to be included in large renovation projects? Only if it's new stuff. Things like this that you're seeing now, and all the ones that I've shown you on mine, that's not part. It doesn't have to, because you're revealing stone and things like that. But if you start doing rebuilds, new builds, anything new, then yes, it does. But obviously, you try and strengthen up your house, which is why I want to show you this one. Now, some people think plaster work here can be quite expensive, especially people coming from the UK. That's because there's no movement in the UK. Nothing here. This is how they do. This is how they should do plaster work, to be honest, in any country, because very rarely you'll get a crack. You should never have to do the plaster again. Look what goes into it. Can you see all the? I don't know if you can see the iron mesh that goes up. Then they spray concrete onto it, and then they plaster afterwards. So in this particular property, if you look here, they wanted to reveal stone, and you can see some stone here. But the problem is it was filled with lots of little bits of rubble and little bits of whatever that the people that built it thought about adding to it to make it a wall. So in this case, the geometer said, you can't reveal stone here, unfortunately. We need to strengthen this up. And this is important. Again, that these people, these geometers and people like that, they know what they're saying. Strengthen it up. Let's get it strengthened, because I'm not happy just leaving a wall like this with all these little bits of rubble and whatever else is in there. Another close-up. I mean, look at the work that goes into this. They sink the pipe work into it. They spray concrete, they plaster it over, and then you should just never have to think about it again. So Bayu was saying they build their walls like a swimming pool. That's true. That is bang on true. Absolutely correct. Because these geometers, they know what they're doing, and they're saying, no, I'm not happy with this. I'm not happy. You can see there's stone here, but they weren't happy with the strength of the building. So they said, no, this is the way we have to do it. Clay blocks with holes inside, very good insulation and healthy compared to concrete blocks in UK and Ireland. Very true, Julian. That is another good point. Got a few builders on here tonight. Let's skip through some photographs. Here's another one that we did. This is coming from years ago. I mean, lots of you will see properties like this on the internet, and they think, oh, but I want a nice stone house. Maybe not everybody wants stone. Look what these people did. They weren't sure. The right-hand side of that property was a modern one with the white part, and the left was stone. And look at that. I know the weather's different. I know everybody's going to start saying that you took it on a sunny day and all the rest of it. True. But still really nice though, isn't it? So look at that. Going back again, a little bit of a miserable looking place. And then that's what they got in the end. But look at the way they finish. I mean, even then, even if you haven't got stone, you know, don't disregard the ones, even if you want something rustic. I mean, look at the right-hand side. It still looks beautiful. If you get the stone part, it still looks wonderful. And you've got great views from it. And here with the balconies and the windows and things like that, you can make things look Italian. So as I've told you many times before, don't ditch the ugly looking properties, because that's unfair. So talking about ugly looking properties, I want to show you, I hope you guys don't mind now. I know I may run slightly over time, but I'm going to show you my project. If any of you are interested, I'm just going to go through some of our renovations. This was my home in Italy. Does it get any uglier than that? Let's be honest. I mean, what on earth possessed us to buy this? I do know, because I can remember. And this is a classic thing of, if I said to any of you, if you said, I'm looking for a detached house, Dave, this is what I want, blah, 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 and I showed you this, you probably just cancel your time with me. But this is what I say to you about being here. Because when we came to this property, and the position, and we love mountains and things like that, and we're also only half an hour away from the coast, this was the one for us. Now, people actually, I remember when we came back after we bought the property, and some of my friends were saying, so you bought a property, let's have a look, and let's have a look. Showed them a picture of that. They were like, oh, you know, the faces, it was just, we could see well beyond that because we'd obviously been there. But I still look at it now, when I see that photograph, and just think, oh my God. And we actually thought, when we first bought it, we thought, we can get in there, we can move in there, it's no problem. We'll manage until we get, how wrong were we? Anyway, this is a before, and this is what it looks like now. This was pretty much finished thing, and I'm going to show you the process of how we got to that. So I'll show you that before again, because some of you may not like this style building. This is exactly what we wanted, and it's stone at the bottom, and then sort of villa style, if you like, on the top. So that was it before, and that was it after. Slightly changed now. My driveway is not as tidy at the minute, or my garden, but there you go. I'll not talk too much about that, because if my wife watches this, she will say something. How long did your renovation project last from start to finish? As I said, they started in that we did it in stages. I'm going to show you that now, but the main outside work, I'll come to that. I'll tell you. This is it from the side. Obviously, we'd started doing some work, but look at the difference again here. My garden doesn't look as nice as that now. I must have really been tidying things up for this photograph. But it's a huge transformation from that, which we actually lived in while it was like that. I think our neighbours used to feel sorry for us. They used to drop us food parcels off, thinking it was actually finished inside, but it wasn't on the outside. So the second phase of works I'll go through. So basically, when we bought the property, here it is again in its glorious state. What we needed to do, because what people don't realize is they come up to these properties, that there's outside, it was nothing. You were not walking onto a garden, you was walking onto just a mess. A celebrity villa now, Julian says. Thank you very much. So even to create pathways around your house, thanks, Shona, for that, we never even thought about things like that. We thought about doing the house up, but then when the kids were sort of nearly falling off the edge of things and stumbling on rocks, we thought we need to have something. We need to have some real work done. We also needed our house underpinning, because there was a huge crack in the side of it. So underpinning is where they drill down. The geometry decides how many pins we needed. These are called micropiles, and this machine comes along. This is a great way of describing it. A machine comes along. You can tell I'm not a builder, and they drill into the ground. They put these huge pipes in there, which are here. They've already calculated how. So these are sunk into part of our house. And if you can see all the taped parts, these bits of where there's tape here, hopefully you can see the arrow. This is because these tubes have got holes in it, and then they pump high pressured concrete into it. Obviously, these are sunk down into the ground under the house. You only see a little bit left out the top. They put high pressure concrete in there, and it creates pools where these tape things are. And we had about 12 of these. And at that time, you know, it needed to be done. But at that time, it cost about 4,800 euros. So you could probably put another 40% on that now. But it wasn't a huge amount, but it had to be done. You can see all these different length of piles that we had to have put in. Really important. We got the advice on it and we got it done. Then we've got, then once they do, you can see the top of the piles here. Hopefully you can see that. Then this cage gets put around them and all of that gets poured with concrete. Sometimes they can do this inside. Sometimes they do it outside. Sometimes they do both. It depends. The crack on our house was huge, so it needed doing. But again, got the right people in. I'm not saying we did everything perfect, but this is with things like this, you don't cut the corners, in my opinion. Once we've done all that, I had to put this photograph out, and you can see my son there on top of the. So this was 2011, and I remember this because they were coming to do some work, and we had to chop a tree down at the front of the drive and get it out of the way before the builders were coming. And I'd never used a chainsaw in my life before. My neighbours came round, and we had a great day. But this was our house. It was a nightmare because we didn't consider all the mess around the house. We didn't consider what happens with the kids. Our kids were young at that time. My son was 5, and the dangerous places. But we'd not considered terracing and all that kind of stuff. But we did want to do a project. So then the big dig out started to get rid of everything and start from scratch again. So leaving the basics of the house, starting from scratch and getting some, at least where we could walk around the house, some pavement areas where the kids could play. We didn't have a drive. We had a driveway, but it was an old one. We had to create a driveway. So that was dug out. And then the guys came to start creating these terraces and things. Then we got a rough driveway put in, which is this, you can see on the left, just so we could get the cars near to the house. We used to pull up with shopping when it was raining and just be in a terrible state for but we just hadn't considered any of that. We were moving to Italy and that was it. We were on a high from that. Then starting to get the terraces built, the amount of iron and concrete that went into these terraces. So people that say, I'll do it myself, and this is not really a high drop off. It looks high from the right, but it's not at all. But, again, the geometer said, if you're going to do this, you do it properly, because then we were adding, as you'll see shortly, we were adding a structure on top of it. Along all this iron here, we've got all the electrics and everything else running along there. So it was and all the pipe works here, the sewerage pipes and everything else was laid along and put in place. Again, the geometer checked all that and sort of got everybody together to say where everything should go. This is when the terrace finally got finished. We rushed into making decisions about having these pillars. We got them all done and then demolished them all because then we wanted brick pillars. So that was this is where, again, I say to people before you start doing major renovations, live with things, see how you feel about things, because this was a obviously you can see a sunny spot, but it gets really, really hot in Italy. So we decided to go down the line of covering all of this, but you only know that once you sat outside and it's 38 degrees and you're trying to have your dinner and you're getting stressed out, and then you think, okay, maybe we should have this covered. Julian saying, is it limestone or sandstone in the walls? How old is the villa? It was only built in about the 60s, something like that, but they are stone. It's the local stone that the house is built out of. Jonathan saying, great job, thank you very much. I'll raise a glass of wine to you as well. Then once we even steps down into the garden and things like that, this is the kind of I mean, it just looks such a mess. And then obviously all this gets poured with concrete and all the rest of it, and we ended up then something. It doesn't look as tidy as that now, and I'm sure Tony had. The great thing is the house was a mess, but my wife, being Italian, made sure that the tomato plants were all in before anything else. That the tomatoes had to be in there. So then this was us clearing around. We got the new wall then on the left-hand side. We needed to close it up because it's not a busy road. Again, young children. We just needed. It actually started to look like Concrete City, and we thought, what, maybe we've gone a bit too far with concrete. You have to have these kind of things, and we had to have the safety. So this is when for me, it looked at its worst, because it's on the right-hand side, as you can see. But we had to start getting some sort of fencing up. We've got everything in place. We could drive the cars up to the house, which was a refreshing change rather than sort of running up the driveway. We've got a longer driveway than we had before. So we got the basics done. And then from this is when we wanted to then transfer the outside of the house, which we started. I remember this day really well. It was January. and the guys turned up to start the work on the house. And this job went from January to the first stage where my daughter had her Holy Communion, which I think was in May time. So the first 5 months, I'll show you that. They started revealing stone on the walls outside by chipping it away and seeing what the stone was like. As you can see in ours has bricks so far. The original stone would have just been the original stone builds would have just been stone. But then I think it was in the 70s where the new standards of that time were that every 90 centimeters, something like that, they had to have a row of bricks. But these bricks are actually the old-fashioned types of bricks, and they look great once they don't look so good there. But then in the late 70s or early 80s, they changed that, and they had to have cement going through there. So people that have those houses, unfortunately, it doesn't look as good, so you can't reveal the stone, really, you just cover over it. But when we saw the bricks, we were a little bit disappointed until they started clearing them up. The builder told us to trust him, which we did. Here it still doesn't look great, but once he'd finished with them, he made it look really good. So here he is sandblasting the stone away. Obviously got rid of all the bits in between the stone, and that's when he was doing that side. Then this is where they start filling in the stone again, and then the picture on the right, this one is when they brushed it all off, and that's the finished look. And I loved it then because the bricks didn't look as harsh as they did before, and it all just blends in really nice. But these guys, when they're doing stone and things like that, it's just fantastic in my opinion. Then we wanted pillars. We wanted things to look older, but these are all modern bricks, and they just rubbed them down with some of the stuff they got left that they were filling in between, just rubbed it down to age them a little bit, because the colors on these are bright red. There was a dark brown, pinky colored, but by the time they finished rubbing them down, it just, for me, they made them look really authentic, if you like, because you can see here the colors of the bricks. It was quite harsh, but when they finished with them, blending them in, it just looks absolutely perfect in my opinion. So this is when we're getting the pillars done all the way around the house. Then I remember getting up very early, taking this picture. We'd got the pillars obviously here along the main terrace, and then we were going to have another roof at the front, so the pillars all along here, and then we're going to have another roof on this part up here where the terrace is. Moving along, this was my favorite part of the restoration, when they started to cover the terraces. So we'd finished these pillars, we designed this little bit at the top, and they started to bring these beams in to create a portico. What you'll see here, that the terraces are not connected to the houses because they don't allow that here. You can't just, it has to be its own structure. So you can see here that there's a gap between the wall and this wooden beam. So all of this terrace is its own structure. The idea behind that is if there's any problems and this starts to dip or anything like that, it's not going to pull your house down. It stands on its own. And that's the law. It didn't used to be, but it is now. And you can see that they stand quite high off the cement, but that's because then they fill all of this before they put tiles on it. Now the gap between obviously upstairs there isn't a gap because you can finish that off with tiles and all the rest of it, but downstairs it's a completely separate structure. Then they start putting the scaffolding round, ready to put the roof on it. This all went, this was all done, this first stage was done in 5 months, but this has been a project that we've worked on for a number of years. We didn't do all this straight away. We didn't have the money to do it all straight away. We moved it as a young family. We just couldn't do it. And this was the last part of the first stage, if you like, where we couldn't quite get it finished, but it was my daughter's Holy Communion, so we had to stop everything, and they took the scaffolding around from these sides, but left it there on the left, because you'll see then the next stages. So we did. So Peter's saying that he loves the mountain. Look, yeah, it's that's why we chose the location. That's why we're saying the house was horrendous, but the location is really nice. And then once all the community had done, we started the wood roof at the front, and then we're obviously moving on to the next part, which is this space up here. Let's do that one. So then we started filling this part in with another roof. The geometer at the time, he likes doing these split roofs. I wasn't sure at the beginning, but once I'd seen the design, to be fair to him, It was excellent. We're really pleased that we listened to them again. And again, you can see here some stonework on this wall, but we didn't do it on all walls. So we did it underneath. Wherever you were underneath the wood areas, we revealed some stone. Then it all started to piece together, just needing the tiles and that sort of thing. And then the final picture is that one that you saw. So that's a bit of my life. I hope that wasn't too boring for you. I know I've not sat there and sort of given prices and all the rest of it, but they did work incredibly hard to do that. Like I say, up to May, and then there was a break of a week or something like that, and then it went to finish just before August. Julie's asking the sort of heating. It's central heating, but we actually have a pellet burning stove that burns pellets. It burns the nuts from olives. It burns wood. It's all connected to the radiators, and that's a superb way, because to run a house full time, because obviously we live here full time on gas, it would be ridiculous prices. But the pellets and those kind of things, they're great. It really heats the house with no problem at all. Okay, guys, so I'm sorry I've taken you over time. I wanted to share a little bit what we've done, and it helps you get to know me a little bit better as well. As I say, we'll be doing a video soon on YouTube to give you some ideas of pricing and that kind of thing. But it is difficult. I didn't want to just sit here and say, oh, that costs that much and that, because it all depends obviously on people's jobs and all, and what you're having done and all the rest of it. But if you do fancy a restoration, some of you may be saying, no, I'm not interested at all. That's fine. Some people ask me, would I do it again? I definitely would. 100% I would, because I really enjoyed yes, there were stresses. Of course, I'm not going to sit here and say there wasn't. There was lots of stresses. There was lots of worries about, is this getting out of hand? But use the right people and stay in control and stay in touch with each other. And I really enjoyed doing the restoration, and we got exactly what we want. So when the title of this video, when we said about a €1 property or €100,000, if the €100,000 property's got pretty much what you want with minor changes, go for that. If it's a 60, 70k property and it just needs a few more changes, go for that, because it will cost you less in the end. But if that 100k property, you think you're going to be doing the kind of works that we did, then it's pointless. You may as well go for the €1 property. That would be my advice, just to do that. Jonathan, have you got some properties coming online soon? Yes, I have, Jonathan, and I'm seeing a load more next week as well. I've been doing more videos than anything, and they've been putting those on YouTube and the rest of it, so you can see some of the newer ones on YouTube. But yes, I will be updating. In fact, Tony's actually said, very kind of him, every now and then he likes to do something for me, and he said that he's going to put the new properties on, because I just had the time. But there you go. Yes, there's going to be some new properties coming on really soon. Okay, guys, well, thank you so much for your comments. Really appreciate that. I hope it wasn't too boring for you looking at photographs all the way through. Next week we'll get back to meet the home buyers, and say that's going to be a great one. Really looking forward to meeting this couple and hearing their story. What can I say? Happy St. Patrick's Day. Have a few drinks. Even if you're not Irish, who cares? It's Friday night. We can have a drink. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Really, really appreciate the support, and we'll see you again next week.